know when he's gonna show up.
Yeah, well,
He pops it, pops in, pops out.
yeah. Right here.
We're up there.
Well, right there. Yeah.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Stand up.
You want to move that chair? Um.
Yeah.
And, so. It's, I know it's in, Wednesday, the big shop. I'm wanting to thank. How much money we have. We're working at trying to high intensity around. In order to do that, one of the things we're gonna have to do is to make them a deposit for it. Doesn't mean we have to hold them that way. So I made, with your permission, a resolution to the agenda, to make Wednesday. Yeah, that we can, kind of deals are more. Cash with the RCPA is here to make permission if that's something that's money that we're not using for the mission maximize. We're looking into minute company bonding, but when we compare what they can actually produce, we make more money with time. Now there's a competition among local banks to see what it, and they might be able to. With that, addition.
Aye.
Motion to approve the town board minutes.
Move. Aye.
Hearing none. Whole business, they get a, record for you. I mailed out everybody a copy of we got from the insurance company that was. We are. New business, I just want to we did. Um, Owasco, necessarily, sewer water quality and, people, so we sent those into both sewer programs and technical office. Waiting, for responses. Until Sunday, but it was sent in a couple of days ago. So we have everything we need, so hopefully he gets the projects, and we're one of the 15 projects to do that. The total cost of the project, because the price up originally was budgeted for like 3.5 million, 4.5 million dollars. With the 2.5, we're trying to, we should have, if we're successful, we'll have about 80% paid back. And with a 20% cost to us, our payback time will be less than 5 years because of the separation of sewer and stormwater that we're paying to the city of Auburn. So it'd be a fantastic opportunity for the town to do that if we're successful with receiving that $2.5 million grant.
I just want to modify the agenda just here.
Yep.
And can we just move resolution 47 right now? We'll just open
Sure. Yep.
it. That motion.
Okay. There's a motion. Is there a second? Discussion. We're going to open up term to local law number 1 for membership. Any other discussion?
Just clarification for anybody who doesn't know, this is the point of the modification of local laws and the membership of the town ethics board for free.
I did. Before we came in, Ron,
Well, let's see if we get a, no. He could be just watching on the,
we joined, and, we're going to have a public hearing here for April 27th. This is in regards to pumps and how to save money, fuel, especially those who use, oil or cocaine going to heat pumps. Could save you 50% or more on your heat and cooling costs for the year. And grants available. We got representation of people who are experts in the field, the people who have converted and used that. And so those people about here to come in and talk about their experiences. Learn about and learn how to save your fuel costs. Come on in and on the 25th at 7 p.m. We do have another meeting next week with the committee to how to promote it better. I'm going to ask an article on this for us to promote the heat pumps and that kind of stuff to get something in the paper. So with their support and help, and with Facebook and our local media, I think we'll get the word out. We've got some street signs, like political signs. We can put. We got 25 of them that they were given. We have some paperwork out here too. If you want to know, like a little bit about heat pumps, if you're not sure what they are and how they work, I can give you some information, or you can go to cnyheatsmart.com website and to there's a lot of different information on their website as well.
Very true, we'll get rid of the papers.
Yeah. Okay. Next, we have Wayne Short from internal EPA. Annual audit. The process is that you guys will know it's taken a formal process where we are right now. So this meeting,
All right. Well, thank you everybody for a few minutes this afternoon to review the results we got. Um, There are a couple of changes that we need to make. But I want to talk, which is on the top. The executive reports are the report will plan additionally qualified, which is the same type we have in the past. It's qualified because the town doesn't have an actuarial study of its health insurance obligation for retirees. So that information, the financial statement opinion is qualified. Other than that issue, we have no issue. Right. Yeah, I mean, right, it's a several times a year, but to do that. And really, other than, having a qualified, there's no real. Also, because we do the audit, we start with all the standards as well, we get a report on internal control and compliance with laws and regulations. That report identifies material control weaknesses. There are a couple of different documents that are included in here. There is what's called auditing standards require that communication letter. It's pretty well all the language. There's also here, and we'll touch on that really briefly. There's a couple of recurring comments that I want to bring to attention. And then we also have in here a draft report on the results of the justice court audit. It is a series of pages of trend information. 4 years worth of trend information for the balance sheet and for the activity statement for the significant funds. So page 2 and 3 is the general fund. You can see that assets in the general fund grew about $300,000 from the end of 2020 to the end of 2021. It was roughly in the amount due from the county from other governments increased about this year. No real change in both years. And so down at the bottom of the page, you can see fund balance in the general fund total grew about $325,000 from a shade under $1 million. The next page is the statement of revenue expenditures for the general fund. Not much change in the total revenues from $1,177,000 up to $1,200,000. So a little bit of an increase, but not much. And about a 7% decrease in expenditures, mostly in the service area. And so again, the fund balance in 2020 grew by about $225,000. In 2021, pages 4 and 5. On page 4, again, a significant increase in total assets, significant increase in cash balance, about $400,000 higher, and about a $418,000 increase in the fund balance. Highway fund. Page 5, you see the reason for most of that increase is in sales tax. The non-property tax went from $800,000 to $1,160,000. So a significant increase in revenues, about $370,000. There was an increase in expenditures, a lot less. So $417,000. Both the super balance. You see that the fund balance for the sewer fund declined from $1,542,000 down to $1,383,000 down at the bottom. In terms of page 7, you can see that there's a slight decline in revenue, $1,301,000 to $1,290,000. Decrease in revenues. The expenditures increased. That service in the sewer fund went from $330,000 to
Example, sewer truck can also collect that year. And so sewer revenues are dependent upon water revenues. And so what year people don't water the lawns and we don't have water, so therefore we don't get as much revenue in our sewer.
Right.
So pray for a dry year, more water. Right? That's right.
What your process would end up there.
Yeah, cost for the sewer, cost for the sewer. It's around nine. And the reduction.
So again, roughly $160,000 in the sewer fund. And then page 8 and 9 are for the water fund. You can see there $185,000 decrease in fund balance for the water fund from $775,000 down to about $590,000. And then if you look at page 9, again, you see very little in revenues. Again, a slight decline. Same reason, therefore. Very little change in the expenditure side as well. But what changed the most was the interfund transfer payment to the capital project fund to support the ongoing water projects. That went from $14,000 to $164,000. And so the decrease in fund more than offset increase in fund balance. And then page 10 and 11 are the capital fund. This is where there are changes coming in the capital fund. The due from other funds, due to other funds, we're actually due within the capital projects fund, so we change those numbers a little bit. The prepaid expense number that you see on there actually needs to get removed. So we made those changes internally this morning. But the final report will be updated on these couple of things. But in total, you see that the fund balance, the negative fund balance in the capital fund is a lot smaller at the end of 2021, mostly because if you turn to the next page, you can see proceeds of obligations, the debt that was used or debt that was taken out during 2021 because of revenue to the capital projects fund. A little bit of a decrease in the revenues, a little bit of an increase in the expenditures on the top half, but that issuance of debt of $1.6 million offsets those revenue and expenditure changes. Total fund so right beneath that is that management comment letter that I mentioned. And there are, as I mentioned, a couple of referring findings that I wanted to point out. Two of that document. Town doesn't have a formal fixed asset policy, something that would indicate, what's the threshold for when something becomes a capital asset versus just, consumable supplies, how long are capital assets expected to be used for, those types of policy decisions. Right now, there's no formality to it. And so, one day you might decide something's a capital asset, the next day you might not. And if you had a formal policy, it would be easier to determine what those threshold limits and decisions are.
Is that boilerplate policy?
There are some state controller's office has some on their website.
Reinvent the wheel.
Correct. Yeah, right. It's not like you need to create one. You need to, get one from the controller's office and, probably make some decisions in there because some of those, have ranges of numbers that you can add in. Yeah, the controller's office website has some models that you can. The other two comments that we had in here are things that kind of go together. Disorders, all of the disbursements that we looked at, was looking at a sample of disbursements during the year. They didn't all have purchase orders. And in addition, one of them was missing documentation about quotes that were supposed to be taken. It seemed like there were quotes done, but the documentation wasn't there. So just a couple of housekeeping type comments. There is a comment at the bottom of the page there about a new standard that's going to be next year with respect to leases. Basically, a lease that is longer than a year in length is going to have to be recorded on the town's balance sheet in the next year. Right now, if you have a lease, but it's the kind where you don't own it at the end type of lease, that doesn't get reported on the balance sheet. It's just a rental expense. But once this new standard becomes effective, basically anything along the balance sheet is a leased asset, is a lease obligation.
Well, I think our school shop is at least for a 4-year thing. Now this is the second year of a 4-year.
Right. And that one is already on here as a lease because it's a capital type lease.
Okay.
Because of the arrangement with it.
Okay.
But this would include any type of lease. Again, anything that's longer than a year. I mentioned that the next report is just the report on the report. And again, we didn't have any findings with respect to that audit. That went very well. The next document that's in here is that communication letter that I mentioned. And we're required under auditing standards to communicate certain aspects of the audit. That's what this does. This letter is pretty well all boilerplate language. In the middle of the first page, it references that qualification of the audit opinion because we don't have that retiree health insurance calculation. It tells you that there were no difficulties, no disagreements with management during the conduct of the audit, and other than what we've already talked about. No findings or issues that we need to bring to the table. I'm certainly not going to read through the entire bound document, but I want to point to a couple of things just to give you. If you're not going to look through the whole document, if you're not going to read it all, and you're probably not, I'd encourage you to look at a couple of things at least. It begins on page 4. It goes through page 4I. That section of the report, if you're somebody that's not used to reading financial statements, this format of this section of the audit gives you in a nice narrative, readable format, a sense of the activities of the town. There are some nice charts and graphs in here that are really helpful in terms of looking at revenues and expenses. I will say that a lot of the information in this section is written based on the government-wide perspective. So what we were looking at in the executive summary is we were looking at each fund individually, right? And a lot of the information that's in this management analysis is based on all of the funds combined, including capital assets, including infrastructure, including long-term debt, all of the assets and obligations put together. So the format might be, but there is a lot of good information in there. The government-wide financial statements themselves are pages 4 and 5, or I'm sorry, pages 5 and 6 of the bound document. So again, the one column, all of the assets, all of the liability. And then the fund basis financial statements, one that you're more used to seeing. And on page 7. Just a couple things that I wanted to mention in the notes to the financial statements. On page 20 of the bound packet, is note 4, which is a note on capital assets. And I just wanted to show you on this page, the table that's in the middle of the page. This shows the town's capital asset balances. Began the year with a net book value of $19.6 million and added $1.7 million during the year, mostly construction in progress and the water project. And so at the end of the year, capital assets had a value, net book value of 21.
Is it depreciation on that?
Yeah, so the total depreciation right at the bottom of that page, $544,000. The other table at the bottom. And then the other table that I wanted to point to is on page 27. So 7, which is a note on your long-term debt. And the note on, or the table on page 27 just lists all the obligations that the town has. Total serial bonds and notes of about $12 million. And then all the capital leases, the installment purchase debt of about $400,000 in total. And then over on the next page is a table that shows the maturity of that debt in 1 year increments out for 5 years, and then 5 years in each row, going all the way up to the end of all that out in 2040. So you can see how that's going to be paid off. Roughly half of the principal each year, and $300,000 or what interest over the next 5. There are budgetary comparison schedules just so you can see how the final budget compared to the actual results. Those are on page 31 and 32. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
I ask this question every year. The fund balances that we carry. Is there? I know that there's not a law that says that we have to keep them capped or something. There is in a school district. Here, is there a recommendation or is there a standard practice of percentage of the overall budget? The reason I ask is I sometimes see the unpopular opinion of if we keep putting money in the bank, maybe we should give some back to the residents and people come in with pitchforks. Is there a recommended, percentage or?
So there's a few of them. A couple that I've mentioned. So I've seen, I think State Controller's Office has some guidance out there that says that, unassigned, unreserved, right, unrestricted fund balance should be around a third of the budget, third of next year's budget. The United States Government Finance Officers Association, the GFOA, they recommend at least 15% of next year's budget be in your unreserved, unassigned fund balance. So I think, either of those percentages just determine
Whether we're in.
That's how we rolling. We get some and we renew it every year again. Our policy is around 60%. We agree to. This would get that's the revenue we get from sales tax and boost us out.
Sure.
And we didn't spend more, we just more general highway.
Yeah.
So we have to take a look, once we get the final, then we'll take a look at in the house, the board set.
Any other questions?
Overall, bro, in your opinion, we're in good shape.
Thanks for your report.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Okay, all right.
Nothing went through the record?
No, these are grants. Okay, next, Dr. Walt Aikman is going to do a presentation on the forest management plan. Dr. Cornelius, anyone could do his IT thing.
You can do whatever. The mic is here.
So Mike is from there. Like laser point at the TV.
It'll work for us. It won't work for the people at home, but that's fine.
Video feedback. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. And you guys, ladies, gentlemen. We're celebrating the 150th anniversary of Arbor Day in the United States. It's typically by tradition last Friday in April, but as you know, we have a big country. So if you live in South Florida, you're celebrating Arbor Day probably in January. And as you move north, you celebrate it later. These are our credentials sent to us by the New York State DEC. Tree City USA certificate. Pass this along for your identification.
For your, reflectors. Your plan through again. Go ahead.
Bringing it to as sort of it could be the thing I bring in Walt did. There's times I've done it. Who knows if it'll be an outstanding warrant.
I checked before you came in. You're good.
I'm clear. I thought that when I was done, I would bring in a chainsaw. Description of what I would do is that I'm a conservationist. And then there's a responsibility. Whether it's a variance or your planning. It isn't all or another. In these states, all blue and all red. They're all right, they're all wrong. It's a mixture of the two, right? Because we have to use the chainsaw for forest resources. But we also have to use our shovel. We're going to create what we're going to plant and what we're going to do. So, I just thought I would describe that for your part of Owasco. And what we do today is say that it's taking 38 and we can switch it and stretch it and make it computer and keep that information. That's highlight the green on the map of the forest for white that we had in it green. And based on the map, 12% early 12% and that represents the kind of biological resource on the forest. Now there's no doubt that they were developed and they were changed. But there's an aspect to this resource wherever you go that tells us something. Oh, I can't make it go on. That tells us something not only about the history of the town of Owasco,
but is scalable whether you are going into your backyard, you're going into your hedgerow, whether you're going up into someone's woods, or you look at it town-wide, right? Has a kind of what we call a fractal property that exists across scales. And that is part of your inheritance. It's a rich legacy in old trees and old tree genetic resources, especially in hickory and in oak. Very valuable trees financially, but also biologically very important trees. So here's an interesting example where we can use these old photographs to study an old landscape. This is where the Kuykendall farm was originally, up in the town of Owasco, up north of the hamlet. And here's Laurel and I out searching for the original balm of Gilead tree that Kuykendall brought with him when he was first sleeping in a lean-to in the late 18th century. That's your pioneering spirit of people who came and developed and created strong community based on a commitment to having strong plants and beautiful landscapes. This is your storied sycamore tree. This was on your only divided highway in the town. Very important story behind this tree was actually saved by a developer who lives in that neighborhood because they knew that this was an ancient tree with a storied legacy, a part of the story of the town. So you might probably wonder, well, why should a town have a management plan? So here's an example. At this point, unless you go at it with your scissors, it's just over 100 pages long. Mine is printed only on single page in color. First of all, it's required by the town ordinance you adopted in 2019. You have to have a tree ordinance in order to qualify for Tree City USA. So that was a check mark you had. The management plan is an important guide for your tree board, members of which have 2-year terms, which I think are close to being up if they're not already up. They're a resource for future work that you provide because the amount of detail I provide here will provide that kind of a resource. It will help future tree boards budget and plan accordingly. And frankly, not to be too crass about it, it is a requirement for the more advanced, important levels of funding through the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, Urban and Community Forestry Grant Program. You have to have an ordinance, you have to have Tree City USA, you have to have a tree inventory, and you must also have adopted a management plan in order to qualify for the kind of money that can help you do the kind of management that is expensive enough that you really need to do. So recapping, because I presented this information to you before, and by all means interrupt if I'm not clear or killing it. 2019 data shows that we have around 1,500 trees on public lands in the rights of way. 770 odd are planted and growing along the town roads or in the town park. And you have about 2 miles of unplanted tree canopy that are growing into the town's right of way. Most of those 2 miles are in rural parts of the town, which are either zoned for farming or are quite remote. The trouble you have is that more than 200 of these trees are large or very large trees, meaning they are greater than 24 inches in diameter. And majority of them are large silver and sugar maples along the avenues. And for reasons we'll go into in a few minutes, those are not the most desirable trees to have close to homes. Here is a shot I took off of Google Earth. So I guess you'd call it a screenshot. I didn't get up into a drone. I wish I had one. But it shows the canopy of taller trees in the northern section of the Avenues neighborhood. These neighborhoods are, of course, familiar to all of you. And many of the residents are very concerned, and justifiably so, of the large silver and sugar maples that grow along the avenues. I am called, the town office is called, Tammy will agree, Mr. Bruno is called regularly from your residents who are concerned about these trees. You've got some big ones out there, and this is by no means the biggest. The trouble is with silver maples is they are considered a very weak wooded tree. They're highly prone to decay, and under normal circumstances, meaning normal storm events, for the most part, the larger limbs are going to be okay. But because they do rot quickly, even a limb 4 or 5 inches that breaks off and it's 75 feet in the air, it can easily take out a windshield, or if it lands on a person, is going to cause considerable injury. And of course, in the avenues, these tall trees are growing very close in proximity to the power infrastructure. Many were planted close to the corners, which is not practiced today. And as you can see, it's sitting right next to the telephone pole. Not a great place to plant anything but a low growing tree. So acceptable practices today would be to emphasize low growers, maybe a medium growing tree, depending on the height of the power lines, under the wires, with an emphasis on taller trees where you don't have the power lines. So the trees that grow in this area are a regular demand on the services of your town highway department. And they're calling me to do a quick assessment. I will spend time looking at it very carefully, judge whether we need to do a thorough assessment. That would be a tree risk assessment. And then typically we call our contractor to fly up in their boom truck to give a very clear look, because what you see from the ground is one thing. You need the observations from the ground verified by someone in the truck. Unfortunately, it's not just silver and sugar maples that are causing a problem for us. As you can see, here's a Norway maple of considerable size. Notice the dead limb in the middle of the tree. Norway maples are now a regulated tree in New York State. That is to say they are considered an invasive plant. They have no commercial value. So for appraisal purposes, they are quote unquote junk. However, they do perform biological services, right? They give you shade, right? They definitely absorb stormwater, but in certain circumstances, because of their branching habits, they are also considered a relatively risky tree to be around. So that is something that is on the do not plant list in your town. Notice also the damage that can occur just by regular life happening close to the road. Obviously, an automobile accident, snowplow, maybe even a snowmobile, who knows? In other words, injury to the tree, which introduces decay and disease. So let me describe your overall condition of the forest. There's 2 criteria we use in describing your forest. First is tree canopy. This is now the go-to terminology when you compare notes between municipalities. Well, what's your tree canopy? And we're talking about the percentage of the land that is shaded by leaves, twigs, branches, and trunks of trees that cover the ground when observed from above. And then we also look at the population data on your street trees, whether it's the tree species distribution and the population structure and what it can tell us about it. The average tree canopy in the town is 33%, but you have more than 23 square miles of land. And a lot of it is in agricultural production. We've got great big woodlots. So that number isn't really helpful until you go into the neighborhood level. And some of your neighborhoods have a dense canopy and some have very little. So for example, here is 2013 satellite imagery. It's been classified, and 1 meter on this map is basically a pixel. Imagine a pixel, that's a meter square. And the imagery is like a giant scanner on the satellite that checks the reflective value at each pixel, and then it classifies it according to its land use. Dark green in here is trees. And so I created, for the sake of illustration, 4 pink areas. On the upper left-hand northwestern quadrant is the Northern Avenue neighborhoods. On the southwestern or lower left-hand corner is what you would call your Southern Avenue neighborhood, south of the school. And everybody can recognize the school just left the center as the big red Y. On the upper right-hand side is Oak Ridge neighborhood, and on the lower right is what I'm calling the Hidden Brook neighborhood. And then I would run an analysis on each of those areas to compare and show you the results. So in the avenues north and south respectively, you have around 41% canopy coverage today, and that's with the existing older trees. Hidden Brook is not even 20%, and Oak Ridge is around 33%. Now, American Forest is the leading forestry organization in the United States, and they work with municipalities across America, helping them marshal resources to manage their forest resources. And beginning around 2017, they began to recommend that suburban neighborhoods try to have a 50% canopy cover. However, they note very carefully that whatever goal we set, it should reflect what is physically possible, socially preferable, and what can you actually plant in your community. So that is something we really need to think about. And as you can imagine, we're going to lose those maples up on the avenues one way or another, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, right? Either we're going to have to react to it because it's a catastrophic storm event, or we're going to be proactive as possible to get those trees down in a sensible fashion and replace them with appropriate trees and try to maintain the canopy as best as possible.
Isn't that it seems to me, not being a tree guy, that you cut down a big tree, you put in a little tree, it's going to take 10 years, before we get to a point where we've replaced even a portion of that canopy.
Yes,
right?
it can take a very long time.
So we could drop to 20% and then, not reach our goal for decades.
That's right. And a lot depends on how much you want to spend, because the most cost-effective way to plant with a smaller tree, Bob calls them sticks, because, no offense, that's what we do, we throw it back at each other. That's about $140. To contract plant a larger tree, you're looking at about $800. Right? So it's a different, where you can, you do what you can. Here's your challenge. Now, this shows in a pie chart the tree species distribution in town, and this is public right-of-ways, ladies and gentlemen. This is not in people's backyards or woodlots. I'm not talking about that. Over 50% in maples. Biologically, we're not very diverse, and that's a problem going forward, because an example would be, say, looking at the lower left-hand corner, we see ash at 5.6%, Auburn's ash around 9%, Syracuse is even more. When you're hit with a serious invasive insect or disease, you lose that portion of your population in one go. Diversity is your friend, in other words. The next important statistic to bring to your attention would be the size class distribution. So on the x-axis, which is the lower axis running left and right, is the size class by diameter. And on the upper left, the y-axis, if you want, are the percentage of trees in those portions of the population. Blue is what we have. Orange is the ideal. Orange is, I colored it orange because Norm Richards, orange stands for the Richards rule. Norm was a professor up at ESF. ESF is right next to the Carrier Dome. Carrier Dome is where you say go Syracuse, and they are the Orangemen. So I colored it orange. Notice that in Richards rule, statistically, you'd like most of your tree population to be in the smaller size class. Reason being that it's true. It takes a long time for them to grow, and you also lose a lot. Mortality is much higher among the younger trees. So that is the trick. So you've got to plant more to get more later in age. So you really need to double down on your planting when you can. So the tree board met for the last year and a half and had the wonderful joy of sitting with me, having me force them to go through this process to talk about our goals. So the number one goal for the town described by your tree board is to have trees maintained in a safe condition. We want to have a sustainable public forest resource that adds value to the community, protects water resources, and soaks up or sequesters carbon. The third goal is to have a tree planting program spring and fall, maintain a street and park tree inventory, have a tree canopy that is structurally and biologically diverse with plants that reflect the natural heritage of the community. So when we diversify the street tree population, let's build it based upon the diversity you've been already inherited. We need to manage invasive terrestrial plant species, encourage private property owners to steward their land, recognize, demonstrate, and enhance the role of vegetation in stormwater management, have a cradle-to-cradle brush management program, and to proactively manage the community forest resource with the adoption of defined forest management planning units. Now, I know any one of these I could talk for 20 minutes on. We're giving you a once over. And I will say to all of you here and everyone online, I'm happy to talk about this in detail as you wish. This, as far as I know, is one of the most innovative things we have in our management plan. I have created 10 management units that are based on your designated land use by your zoning areas, right? Together with the catchments that go into the key water bodies in the region. And that creates us 10 areas we can concentrate our analysis and our management goals. So for example, this is what I call the river management unit. Everything inside this red-shaped polygon drains to Owasco River. It does not drain to Owasco Lake. And all the little green dots represent street trees that were cataloged in 2019. And I have created maps like this for every one of the 10 management units in the town. And in the plan, we go through these management units, unit by unit, to describe the challenges and opportunities within each unit. And there are many. So what are the steps to meet our goals? One, we have to maintain an annual tree budget that proactively keeps pace with expenditures to support tree board involvement and oversight of forestry management activities, including tree inventory, database maintenance, tree assessments, planting site assessments, and tree risk assessment. We need to maintain funding levels to support tree board involvement and oversight of activities that include tree planting, pruning, and removal. Sustain an ongoing focus on tree and urban forestry funding in anticipation of direct and reimbursement grants, right? You've got to keep an eye on the ball when the funding gets announced, because believe me, it's very competitive. Plan and promote tree planting celebration support in partnership with neighborhood associations, local schools, and watershed protection agencies. Oops, sorry. Cultivate and deploy a volunteer planting network. Number 6, we need to manage the aging trees along the town's avenues with an eye towards targeted risk assessment and removal. We need to encourage and foster the planting and cultivation of native trees and shrubs, develop and support an invasive plant control capacity that can effectively partner with state and regional organizations, continue to investigate and support alternatives to the town's brush management program, and finally, come on, oops, no. Strive to plant 12 trees in town rights of way per planting season and encourage residents to plant 3 trees each year on their property. Can't achieve our canopy goals on public rights of way alone. So here's where the rubber meets the road. These are management ideas. You are the policymaking team. The blue shows what I understand the budget numbers to be since 2015 moving up to 2020. And the orange represents what I understand to be the expenditures. As you can see, expenditures are going beyond what you budget. The basic management costs for your enterprise are really 3 categories. 1 are removals. In 2020, the average contracting cost for removal was $2,160. You take a typical large tree you've removed under emergency circumstances, and you're looking at $3,000 easy. Tree planting costs. In 2021, the average bare root tree cost was $90. Using volunteers together with the town labor involved in prepping the sites, you're looking at around $157 per tree. However, the average Baldwin burlap tree, that's the kind you buy at the nursery, comes in a burlap bag with the soil. The average cost wholesale is $136. Using public employees to plant them, the average tree cost is $90 per tree. Total cost of a B&B tree is $226, 40% more than the cost of a bare root tree. That's why most communities are doing volunteer supported bare root planting in the fall when it's easy and safe to do. And then they do contract or town or city run crews doing B&B in the spring, because B&Bs are heavy and they're not necessarily family friendly. And you don't want, backhoes and stuff and families, they don't necessarily mix. Finally, staffing, tree board support, inventory, tree assessments, including tree risk assessments, which is not the same thing at all. grant funding applications, Tree City USA certification. The management plan presented 3 budget options. Option 1 is the one that you basically have in your 2022 budget, around $16,000. However, again, in your budget for this year, you do not include reference to bare root tree planting or anything like that. So in other words, we're still status quo. If you blow it out and say, well, I want to do everything Walt wants in 1 year, I want 350 grand. That's not happening for a number of reasons. Not only is it impractical to plant 50 trees a season, every season, and ask you to pay 350 grand a year. That's not happening. I know that. But this is budget option 3. This is the practical way to defensively and proactively manage what you're doing, is to bump your budget up by $20,000. First, focus on at least 12 tree removals a year. Try to do 12 bare roots in the fall, 12 in the spring, and then have staffing for tree and site assessment and seeking the much needed funding. So that's what I would say is where you should go if you can see your way towards it. Broad strokes. Number of the roads in the town are county highways, and they have control over the rights of way. We are working together with the supervisor's office and the town highway department to come up with a practice for doing the kind of plantings we would like to do on the county rights of way. Another example. Tonight, I think you were talking about the I&I project. It's very important moving forward that anytime you're doing a street gray infrastructure project, I urge you to incorporate trees in what you're doing. So for example, on 3rd Avenue, Van Dyne Avenue, and Stryker Ave. Notice the little blue dots on those pink roads. That's more than $50,000 worth of removal, stumping, and replacement costs on trees alone. Because if you go in there and start digging stuff up to replace water lines, sewer lines, I promise you, the damage you'll do to those really old trees, you're just going to be coming back after the fact to do a removal on the tree you killed by doing the project. So let's integrate the green infrastructure work with the gray each and every time. And when we're doing a project, say on East Lake Road, and we're going to do something with a contractor, here and there, you got a special tree of that unique heritage character I was talking about. That's where you go the extra mile to protect the roots. Some of the other ones, not that big a deal. Finally, I'll just say in tree risk management, no tree is risk-free. They don't exist. So the question is not, do you have no risk? How do you manage the risk you have? You need to have an integrated risk management and assessment into every tree call. You initiate the documentation of the call, gets passed on to the highway superintendent. Superintendent then calls the contractor. I go out and check the contractor's work, and they get back to you, the tree board, and the citizen, and we see a complete circle. Gentlemen, ladies, I'm party to already 2 tree lawsuits having to do with people squabbling over who did what to my tree, your tree. This is a big deal. Tree risk assessment, tree risk management is very important. We need to have a detailed tree risk management strategy and have it become a formal part of our annual work plan. And incorporate tree risk assessment into our future funding requests. In other words, we do the tree risk assessment and we build that into our application. So with that, I will finish. Hopefully I did not burn up the clock. I wasn't keeping track of time. Are we good? No stoning?
No stoning.
Stoning and PowerPoint usually kind of go together.
Yeah.
So the fact that that all these trees that are along the roads and the avenues are these silver maples and the stuff that we don't really want. We did that to ourselves, right? They didn't grow naturally there. We put them there.
Correct. And it wasn't this generation.
No, no. I mean, I'm sure we didn't do it on purpose, but it's not a natural phenomenon that we're dealing with. And street tree, when you say street tree, those are the trees in the right of way?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I'll add, it's my thought that most of those silver maples were planted before, during, and after when the Dutch elm disease hit. It was promoted as the next best thing. You know, here's a tree that grows really fast. and you'll get that canopy over the street that you really want quick, not thinking about the downside.
So the whole purpose of this procedure, as Walt said, we started the tree board, we started the ordinance, and then the last final phase of us to go after grant money and Tree City USA, which we went after. And this has been a 2-year process that we've been accumulating over the last 2 years. It's been a long process. Is this management plan. Once we have this, then we can apply for, once they come out, we apply for grants similar to what the city of Auburn did. How much did the city of Auburn got at one time?
They got 20,000 for tree planting. And then they got, I don't know, I want to say 25 or 30,000 for inventory and management plan.
Yeah.
But they were not eligible to apply for management funding.
Yeah.
Because you paid for this yourself, you paid for your inventory yourself. Now that you have these ready, you can apply for the management funding. That means you can apply for grants, matching grants of $50,000 or more, which could make a difference on the avenues.
Substantial. That's the whole purpose, I mean, besides doing the right thing, this is the reason why we're doing this, is to better manage our canopy and do the right thing and save money.
Yeah, and the grants are so competitive. You got to have every T crossed. If you don't have Tree City USA, you automatically lose 5 points on your application. You will not get funding, I promise you. So we have to try to have everything in
And
line.
we've got to really, we try to be the template for others to copy when we did this, so that, I think when we do submit, we should be very competitive and hopefully be successful.
Yes, and so I know it's a lot to get through. I wrote it to be interesting. I hope it will be. But this is your chance. Go through, pick randomly. If you don't like it, go after with a red pen, call me up, chew me out, we'll fix it. Because I guess at a certain point, this gets adopted, right?
So what the plan would be is for you to take a month to read it. We'll put this on the agenda next month to approve. And then after that point, we'll officially have based on our ordinance, we'll have a management plan in place that we purposely designed for 2 years to come up with, and then we can apply for funding. That's the goal.
It's big. Is there a digital copy?
Yes, sir.
Well, as a resident, I'm asking this question. Why does NYSEG not get any responsibility in removing some of those trees that are up at the power lines? Why does it all fall on us? I mean, God knows they've got multi-billions more than we have.
I think the practical answer is they have a budget too. And they have removed some trees when we have asked them. But under the law, they have rights to cut to protect their infrastructure, but they have no responsibilities beyond that. The Public Service Commission gives them much more control over the trees with a regular budget on a 7-year cycle than we have.
Okay,
All right.
well, thank you so much for your presentation. Okay, we are going to go to resolution 48. Is a motion to authorize supervisor to sign an agreement for legal services with Blair Law Firm or special counsel for the zoning and planning board. Can I get a motion for discussion?
Second.
Tony and Mike, discussion.
I'm going to say no, just because I think that we should be advertised. I have no issue with Mr. Blair. I'm sure that he'll do a fine job, but I just have concern about not looking to see what's out there.
Any other discussion? I'm gonna do a roll call.
Councilman Cornelius.
No.
Councilman Cachardi.
Yes.
Councilman Vitale.
Yes, I think Blair does a good job at it.
Councilman Vallone.
Yes, because I had discussed with Ed and he explained all the questions I had in our time discussion.
Supervisor Wagner.
Yes. Okay, the next resolution is part of Walt's presentation and part of the Tree City USA is the Arbor Day proclamation. Can I get a motion for discussion?
Move.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we had the public hearing open.
So
Anybody would like to speak, public hearing, before we close it? Anybody on board? Okay, motion to close the public hearing,
Second.
Fred and Tony, or whoever, all those in
Yeah.
favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Next resolution is to, now we're gonna get into the legalities of the public motion, the public law, seeker. Can I get a motion for the approval of seeker?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion on seeker? All those in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 52, the resolution of town board to adopt and act local law number 1. So we did the public hearing, we did the seeker, now we're doing the adoption of local law number 1, which is to expand the Board of Ethics from 2 to 3 people, 3 to 5 people, 3 to 5 people. We were not going to be nominating anybody tonight for that position. We will, we did advertise once before, we can advertise again,
Yeah.
Jeremy, your committee can decide whoever you want to recommend.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll let Jeremy take the lead on that. So is there a motion to approve local law number 1?
To go from 3 to 5.
Yep, is there a motion?
I'll make that one. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Carried. Okay, next thing would be the audit and payment of claims. Can I get a motion for discussion?
Second.
Who was that? Tony, Mike?
Any comments, questions?
I do have one question. Well, just a request. Can this be emailed, the spreadsheet version of the audit of claims? I believe there's a spreadsheet that's supposed to be at the end of the claims voucher packet.
We have
We do
abstract.
not have it, we do not have a spreadsheet. We have that. That
Okay.
can be emailed.
Yes, please, if I can
Yeah.
get this before the
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah. The other thing I'm working on, but it's gonna take a little bit, is I'm going to get a scanner and start having all those vouchers scanned.
Mhm.
And then like once a week, we can shoot you all an email and you can take your time to look them over.
That would be awesome. Yeah,
But I
appreciate
just
that.
haven't-
Yeah, a
I
lot
keep looking
easier.
at different
Yeah, we've
scanners, and I
been-
just haven't sat down and.
Tammy's been working on it for a while.
Okay,
And it came from the county thing that she's been working on with the county to get everything digitized.
Yep.
Yeah.
So one of the things that they recommended was the,
No, they didn't. That was mine.
oh, okay,
So
Good
I
idea.
looked at it,
Yes.
That's all my
the
idea,
queen.
because they're busy and they don't get in here to look at. it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of stuff.
Take the
It's just
star.
quite a packet to look at all at once, so
Yeah.
I like to try to keep up on it if I could.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Good. So any other questions for Jeremy's?
Nope, no.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We do have to go into executive session to talk about contract negotiations.
Yep.
It's at 5:07. Can I get a motion for that, please?
I make a motion,
Second.
and I would not expect that we would have any business post executive session.
Very good.
Except just a motion to adjourn.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, everybody.